Andy.
So good to see you. How long do you think we have known each other? I gotta figure it's been over 5 years, I would think.
Probably, I would say closer to maybe 7.
Maybe seven. And obviously, we've talked shop on numerous occasions at various events. But I was so glad that you decided to write a book and share all the stuff that you've learned, not just with insurance agents, but with anybody who is trying to figure out a way to market their business. I've often said that everybody is in the marketing business. I don't care what you do. I don't care if you're CEO of IBM, you're in the business of marketing because it's what drives everything. You
It's
can't
true.
grow without marketing. And so I think your book does such a great job of breaking down some of the basics on things that you can do on a day-to-day basis. But I want to spend a little bit of time, maybe the most amount of time, talking about branding because I feel like people market, and you can tell me if they think I'm wrong. I think people market expecting an immediate, instant result from it. They want to do this action and get an immediate response from that
Yeah.
action. Is that
Yes,
what
I
you
agree
find?
with you. Yeah, I agree with you. And I love the topic of branding. Branding sets yourself apart from the competition. And one of the things that we can do to brand ourselves is just even in our communication skills, how we interact with others. Would you agree with that?
Certainly. So let's talk about that a little bit. So, okay, so when you say branding, I think a lot of entrepreneurs, their eyes glaze over and they're like, well, I don't have the budget to do branding. I'm not Coca-Cola. I'm not a big company with money to spend on branding. So, how would you make a branding conversation one-on-one?
Right. So branding is to me what people think of the feelings that come to mind when they think of you. And it could be you as a person, right? So Maya Angelou has that quote that's saying, people may not remember what you do, but they'll always remember how you made them.
Feel.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I would think of that as branding. So when you're interacting with someone, and if how you communicate with them determines how you make them feel, well, then in theory, how you communicate with others is a huge part of your branding. And so even if you're just a solopreneur, a one man shop, how you interact with your clients, your colleagues, referral partners, that's all a huge part of branding.
Okay, so I'll be the first to admit, though, when it comes to the feelings part, I'm a little short on that part. So I want to think about my brand in terms of how I make people feel. Well, how do I even know how I'm making them feel? Like, what's something I have to do consciously to help people feel a certain way? Is it more just, hey, lift people up instead of tearing them down? Like, what's some of the ways to help them
Yeah,
feel a certain way?
that is a great question. I think it has a lot to do with working on ourselves, right? And so in my book, I spend like chapters all talking about different characteristics that you can build that will help you become magnetic so that when you are interacting with others that they feel drawn to you, they want to get to know you, they are intrigued by you. And not really about benefiting you really when you, like for example, Andy, ever since we've met, you've always been, well, let me try to help you, right? So in one of the chapters I talk about how serving others, and even serving others doesn't necessarily mean like work, but even offering advice. You know, when we've met one on one, you've offered advice and never asked anything in return. And that is one of the qualities in this book. And there's tons of other ones. And it's really interesting because it's not anything that we studied the qualities of magnetic people. A lot of the people that I view as magnetic today were once unpolished people. And so it was very encouraging to me that this is a quality and characteristic that you can build and develop over time.
The things that struck me on that note in your book was about your story in particular. But we don't have to get into that necessarily, but more just in terms of sharing people's stories with each other, way to build a relationship and a connection in a way that's much different than just, O's and ones and zeros. How would you suggest that entrepreneurs share their story, even if it's a little on the personal side, which you did in your book? You shared a lot about your story.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time to read my book. It really means a lot to me. It's a true gift to me. Anytime anyone says, "Hey, I read your book," to me, to any author, like the biggest compliment and gift you can give us. So thank you for that. And yes, I did share my personal story because I feel like the audience may not remember just facts if you're just sharing facts, but we actually think in pictures, right? So if you're sharing your story, people will actually resonate and remember your stories. So not everybody does have a story to
Right.
share. Everybody has their unique and expertise. So I do believe everybody should write a book once in their lifetime. My story was that I grew up as a profoundly shy person, an individual, very reserved. Never spoke in class. If you were to ask my classmates in high school, they would just be so shocked to find that here I am now, years later, I am speaking on stages, being interviewed on podcasts, and trying to get my name out there and putting myself out there. It's so scary to put yourself out there
Yeah.
because we all fear judged or the feeling of being rejected, right? So,
Or
so
good
that's
enough, or just, yeah.
yes. But the truth is, when you share your story of I was once here and now I'm here and here's how I did it, then it could potentially help someone else that was in your shoes.
Well, that's inspiring. I mean, you think human beings are preconditioned and built to try to help others. I think that, politics and the religion, all that to the side, I think humans fundamentally are interested in trying to help others and trying to lift other people up and try in some small way to make somebody else's life better. A parent, let's face it, it's a pretty thankless job, but people do it because they really do want to help grow that next generation. So, going back to an entrepreneur, how does an entrepreneur go about helping others? You said, okay, we're talking about volunteering. What are some tangible ways, or what are some things maybe you have done to try to help others, other than the obvious answer of your book that you, frankly, you're not going to be Stephen King millionaire from this. You're really doing it because you had a passion for trying to help people, and you thought this was a way for me to put it together in a way that I could get it in front of people. But
Yeah.
most people aren't you. How could others do it?
So everybody has expertise in their industry, correct? So you could be a plumber, you could be an attorney, you could be an electrician. And I think one of the biggest opportunities is just sharing information in a way that the normal population can understand it, right? And that's a great time because YouTube, Shorts, Instagram, those are all blowing up with people that are sharing their expertise. So that's like a easy way for entrepreneurs to share information, and that actually helps others while that they are an expertise, so that when the time comes and you need a plumber or an electrician, then they're going to think of you.
Okay, so let's say I am in sales,
Mhm.
which general plumbers are not. Okay, so let's say I'm selling something. We'll use insurance just because that's our world, but it doesn't
Uh-huh.
limit it to that. What are some ways that an insurance agent can help somebody? Because you got all these regulations and all these rules. You can't just run around telling everybody, well, this is how things work. What are some
Mhm.
smaller ways maybe that somebody who's in sales can help others with their
Yeah.
expertise?
So I would say use your current clients for ideas. So if you're constantly getting asked a question from your client, how do I do this? Or what do you think about this product? Then that down, make a list of frequently asked questions by your clients,
Wow.
and then just take one day out of your afternoon and just say, hey, my client was asking this question, and then just answer it. And pretty soon you'll have a library
Cool.
of frequently asked questions. And this can be
Hmm.
applied to any industry, right?
Right. And use both the questions and your responses on your social media, on your YouTube, on your TikToks, on any of those platforms where you're able to share with your audience, hey, I had a client ask me about this question and here's how it worked. And same thing
Yes,
in my world with agents,
the
I spoke to
agent.
it and this is what was the answer. Okay. I like.
Yes.
So, in terms of how they present themselves, you talk in your book about how to interact with people and how to experience when people. What are some tips there? What can entrepreneurs do when they're having one-on-one conversations?
Yeah. So, and I mentioned this at the conference this summer, but the traffic light rule is a really good tip. So ever been in a conversation where one person just dominates and they're just talking the whole time, you can't get a word in? Well, this traffic light rule is a good rule to remind yourself that when you're having a conversation, it should go back and forth,
Yeah,
right? And so, how it works is the first 30 seconds is your green light, and that's when you're talking. And then the 30 seconds is your yellow light, and then that's when you're wrapping things up, the conversation, what you're going to say. And then at the end of the 60 seconds, you're going to stop and then let the other person speak. And if they are interested in what you have to say or they have more questions, they will ask you. But most of the time, it just is a good general rule to not, not on a tangent. So that's just one of the tips in the book. And actually, Jackie Walter, one of my best friends, you already know this, is the one that shared that tip with me about 8 years ago. She sent me the article and said, I hope I don't talk too much, But what I like about Jackie is that she's always sharing information and she's always finding ways to improve on herself, right? So I personally don't think that she has ever talked too much, but in her mind, she's always thinking, well, how can I improve?
sure.
So, yeah, so sharing that information made a difference in my life too.
I've always found you and Jackie are very engaged listeners. And maybe that's part of the reason why anytime either of you guys are talking, it never seems like it's over talking because you guys are such engaged listeners too. It's not like I know people, won't name their names here, that they just go on and on and on and on. At the end of it, I'm like, okay, I don't even know what we're talking about. And then you try to say something and you could just tell they're not paying attention and they're, head somewhere else, maybe even on themselves. It is a unbelievable talent to have that sort of engaged listening. And people who are speaking know it so instantly when their audience is engaged. When somebody they're talking to is really listening, even if it's nonverbal, nodding of the head, it's amazing how those little cues can make a big difference in the conversation and endure person you're speaking to mutual respect.
It's true. I was listening to this ex-CIA agent,
Hmm.
and she said that the more people think that you know about them, the more they're going to like you. So when you're at a party and you're meeting someone for the first time, you're you that by talking about yourself is going to impress them, but really it's learning about them, finding out what their interests are that will really impress them. Like sometimes walk away from a conversation and they'll say, "Man, I really like that person," right? Um, but the truth is, they about themselves the whole time, and so true. I mean, the fastest way to build trust is to
Yeah.
be a good listener.
You know, Personally, I have a little bit of the opposite problem. I rarely share my story. And I think that is something that people don't to know me as well as maybe I would like for them to, because I don't do a really great job of sharing.
Hmm.
And I think so. Okay, Dr. Phil, we may have to explore this problem here. So why don't I share my story? I really love hearing other people's stories. So sometimes I think what happens is I end up having a conversation with somebody, and at the end of it, I've learned everything I can about them, and I've shared very little of myself. So that may be part of it.
Interesting.
I think part of it is I don't find my story to be that interesting, and maybe other people feel that way. Like, it's not that interesting a story. Maybe others would feel differently. I don't know.
It's got to
It's,
be interesting though, Andy, because of where you're at today. You've got to have a story behind that. So I think people would be interested in hearing how you got to where you are and what made you Andy, right?
it's because at a conference this past summer, um, I had a whole presentation all ready to go, right? And I think I started the conference and I just jumped right into the agenda. Okay, here's what we accomplish over the next, weeks. And I realized even as I was doing it, even consciously at the time, I'm like, really knows who this guy is. And to just assume that we're just going to jump into this agenda and I'm just going to introduce myself and my name and that's it.
Hmm.
What do you think I could do to let people in on my story? And we won't go into my story, but like,
Oh,
but
yeah.
there's a lot of people out there that are probably like me that are maybe not as comfortable sharing their story, or maybe they feel like other people not really that interested in it. Like, what would you say to them?
Okay, so understand that feeling. I think that people would be interested in what you have to say. In fact, we have time right now, Andy, not to
Uh-oh.
put you on the spot, but I think about the profound, the points of your life, right? And where you were, what was going through in your mind, and then what made you decide to go a certain direction, because somewhere out there is someone who's going through that same exact thing right now. And maybe just even if you share it and only that one person you make an impact on, it's all worth it, right?
Well, I do know I have something in common with you, even though I'm significantly older than you. My immigrated to this country when I was 3 years old, and we took a ship from Amsterdam, Holland, where I was born, and we immigrated to the United States. We like the old immigrant way before your time. You took a ship, you went into Ellis Island in New York,
Oh, wow.
and that's where they checked in immigrants. And if you go to Ellis Island today, they actually have a computer of all the people that they have kept track of that went through Ellis Island as an immigrant, legal immigrant. And we're the family, a picture of my family is actually in that computer system
Wow,
as
that just
having
gave me goosebumps.
come into Ellis Island as an immigrant. My dad worked for a big company, a big global company, and they deployed him to the United States. I was 3 years old. I didn't speak English. I only spoke Dutch. I was only in preschool.
Oh, wow.
Um, and have been in the United States obviously ever since. But anyway, I really connected with your family's story of immigrating to the United States as well, and being in a strange place, and not knowing people and the
Learning
cultures,
a new language.
and learning a new language. I was so young, just like you were so young, so it
Mhm.
wasn't hard to pick up the new language. But
Well,
my
you
parents,
remember your parents, they went through to make it, to start all over in a
yeah,
different country, right? So those are things that you, as it kind of who you
yeah, for
are.
sure. No, for
Yeah.
sure. And I have to admit, I worked with thousands of agents, and I'll bet you not one of them knew that story about me.
Wow. Well, I am very intrigued to learn more about it. And I'm so glad that you took the time to
That's how
share that.
bad I am, Malia. I'm so bad at it. I'm so bad at something as simple as that that maybe some people might be interested in. I don't know.
So
Lousy at
if
sharing.
you could write a book right now, what would your tagline be? Like, what would your message be?
I so believe in changing the world for the better,
Mm.
even if it's only in the small ways. And so, part of what I really connected with you on your book, we're just trying to help people, even if it's only in a small way, even if they go to your book and only find a couple of
Yeah.
things that they go, okay, that's I'm glad that got brought up. And then it will be worth it. It gives you that feedback and says, boy, I really learned something and I gained something. And I did myself. And that's why I posted out on our Facebook group about what I benefited from it. But yeah, I feel like if entrepreneurs be successful, if I could help agents with their business, if I could help consumers with their healthcare needs, if I could help my community,
Yes.
yeah, I think it was to me. I don't need to have my name up on a building or in lights or anything. That doesn't,
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
need to be, driving Ferraris. Not really much to me.
You never know how one piece of advice can help push someone to the next level and that could change your life. I mean, I remember the first time about to hire my first producer, and I was on that rooftop at one of the conferences we were in, and then you just told me, Malia, you will wish that you had done it sooner. And I hung on to that, came back from the conference, and proceeded to hire my first producer. And that was life changing, not only for me, but my family. I get my family gets back, which is so important. I think it's really back to what you said earlier. You said, I think that most people want to help others.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because I that there's two sides to that. There's people
Okay.
that believe that everybody wants to help, and then there's others that are like, well, everyone's out to get you. It's very telling when someone says, hey, everyone's out to help you, because that's how they are. Like you naturally want to help others, you believe that. And maybe, and this is where our story too is, when we were trying to get our feet on the ground, we did have other people help us, and so that's why it's to help others.
Even with my kids who are now up, I try to strike that balance. I
Mhm.
certainly ask them if there's anything to help, but I certainly try to let them do their thing. And I wait and wait and wait until they something they want to ask me. I'm so excited when they are, and try to control
Yeah.
myself a little bit. But you know what? Being there is probably what they really want and need. And so that's probably the key of a lot of people. If
Mhm.
you just say to people, look, I'm here for you. If you need something, I'm here. Maybe they take you up on it, maybe they don't.
Right.
But what a difference that makes in your connection with people. If you say, I'm here for you. If you ever need anything,
That's true.
let me
That
know.
is true.
And maybe they don't contact you, maybe they do.
Yeah. And I think that in my book, I do talk about the power of serving others. And after the book published, I was trying to kind of wrestle with that. Like, okay, but where does it stop? Because you can serve others so much that prioritize others instead of your family, right? And I think the key too is
Yeah,
others that actually need the help. That if you um, there's a between enabling and others, right?
absolutely.
So there's some things in there. And by the way, my book, I was talking to a very successful person, business entrepreneur, and he said to me, "Hey, I read through your book. No offense, but I already do a lot of these things." And I was like, "Well, that's great." Because that just confirms that
Right.
successful business people
This is
actually
what they
do these
do.
things. So they're not like original ideas, but I did take the time to research, well, why does doing this thing helps you become a better person and be more magnetic? And then that way, because have you ever thought, okay, I already do this, but why do I do this? Right. So there's a lot of psychology behind it and stories and examples.
And in your book, okay, let's just some of this is basic blocking and tackling. Nobody does them all, and nobody does them. I was reading through it. Yeah, there were some things I'm like, okay, I do that. But there were other things, and I already threw myself under the bus about my story. You did such a beautiful job of explaining your story in your book. And I do a lousy job of that. And that's part of the reason why I brought it up on this interview, is because I know I'm bad at it and I know how important it is. And I read that in your book about how you shared your story. So that would be if there's one thing I took away is I work on that.
Oh, I love that. I
And it's
love that.
not like I didn't know it. I know I'm
Mhm.
bad at it, but it made me think about it. And obviously, again, that's one of the reasons why I brought it up. Any last couple of ideas, suggestions, advice that you would give to anybody who's listening to this recording?
Yeah, so one of the things that I just want to share is all it takes is one person to blow up your business. So if you're an entrepreneur that's just starting out, just remember, I mean, after a while, it's that comes up and blows up your business, and then another one comes along, and pretty soon it'll be like a snowball effect, and you can't even stop the business from coming in, and then you have to hire people to help you with the incoming business. So it will happen. You just have to work on it.
Leah, I can't thank you enough for joining me this morning. I've greatly enjoyed our conversation. I just like, conversing with you. So that was really, really nice. Thanks so much for the time. I'm glad our audience was able to hear this. And I can't recommend enough to everybody who has been listening to this interview to check out Malia's book, Magnetic Allure. Malia Rogers is the author. Let me know if anybody needs the link to the Amazon site where you can purchase the book. It's only
30
130 pages all in.
Yeah.
And so everybody could knock it out. As you know, I was on a trip and I decided to take the book with me. I knocked it out on a flight and a little bit of time after that. So it was super, super easy to read. And I really learned a lot. And I can't thank you enough for spending the time with me here this morning, Malia.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you for your time. Appreciate your support.